So this is a panel on balancing developer freedom and security. So when myself and Gaurav were coming up with this panel, we were like kind of thinking about, well, what are the ways in which the explosion of containers and everybody, all these teams started using all these containers, started moving really fast in some cases, and doing things they weren't able to do before. But then the security teams had a look, and they were like, hang on, now you're running 5 different versions of Debian, and Alpine, and Red Hat, etc., and you've got all these CVEs and stuff. We need to stop this and rethink things a bit. And so we're kind of thinking about how many examples are there of this through history where like security and developer freedom have been in tension. Like the wish for engineering teams to travel fast and the wish for security teams to, well, be secure. So we've assembled a crack team of panelists to discuss this topic. I guess I'll just go one by one, let you introduce yourselves. Gaurav?
Hello, my name is Gaurav Saxena. I work for one of the largest automotive companies in US. I lead a platform engineering team, and the use cases are like connected vehicle platforms. So we ingest a lot of vehicle data to cloud, and then do OT updates from cloud to vehicle. So you can think about like Kubernetes, security, CI/CD, observability, databases, messaging. They are the kind of the components of our platform.
Hi, Marcus Eagan. I previously was a TL at that large U.S. automotive company, actually. And after that, I built a couple products at MongoDB, small database company. And today I am a founder of like a Bazel remote cache, remote execution company that's mainly for vehicles, semiconductors, bare metal workloads. And ASF committer and CNCF committer on a few projects. So not as smart as this guy, though, or this guy, or these two.
Okay. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, I'm Adrian Mouat. I'm a DevRel at Chainguard. I've got a bit of history doing a lot of talks on like supply chain security, and wrote a book in Docker a long time ago. Don't buy it, 'cause it's now like 10 years out of date. But do go on, if you have a subscription to O'Reilly, feel free to like click on that and I'll get royalties. It's probably illegal to say that. Okay, we'll keep going, Kat.
You are being filmed. I'm Kat Morris. I work for Syntasso. We build a platform framework called Cratix. So I do a lot with developers and making self-service easy. So that developer freedom thing is something I'm quite familiar with. But for all my sins, I used to work in security with government, and I was an ISO 27001 auditor for a while. So I've had to deal with the security thing as well as this developer thing.
Hi, I'm Zenla, the CTO of Edera. We build container security products and hardened runtimes for running containers unmodified in a secure environment. I've spent 12 years in tech. I'm 26 years old, started when I was 14, working in the Internet of Things for companies like Google. And I've seen it all. And I am very interested in container security after many years of insecurity that I have seen.
Okay, excellent. So I thought I'd start by asking people if they had any good examples of times when security and developer freedom have come into tension. Marcus, I see you're ready to answer already. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let me just quickly engage the audience. Who here has heard of an MCP server? Okay, fair, everybody. Who here has heard of Apache Solar? See, not that many people. See, I'm old. So I'll tell you the MCP server. I've dealt with it in both contexts, many contexts, but I'll tell you about the MCP server where like I want people to try new software and explore our capabilities, our API, our docs from the command line with the help of agents. But those agents don't know what environment variables are. And so the last 3 times that I've tried to stand up services using MCP servers that deal with disparate systems in the cloud, we see credentials in the Git source tree. And so like, I think every time that I have seen a step forward in freeing developers or accelerating developer productivity, or there's some useful abstraction that shows promise, in those early days, there's oftentimes a step backward in terms of how secure that innovation is, or how safe it is. And that's a simple example. Does that make sense to you?
No, absolutely does. Does anybody else have an example?
Yeah, I have a really funny example. So the Internet of Things, it's very common to have people who are not engineers or developers deploying complex software, people learning how to use Linux on the fly effectively. I was brought in at Google to solve a huge IoT security problem. And what was effectively happening was they were basically tasking people who were electrical engineers, who are really, really great people, but don't know anything about Linux, because it was kind of moving at the time to like where they were learning newer kind of computing concepts, but they're not really trained in that stuff. They were doing things like installing Ubuntu desktop on industrial PCs and deploying them into electrical rooms and running them completely isolated from the network, but they would run kernels that were, 5 years out of date and old software, and it was really, really hard. And when we talked with the security teams at Google, all they wanted to do was like, does it deploy IPv6? Have we secured the network rules? They didn't think about the software that was actually running there and can it be exploited. And these are things that are running, in secure environments that need to connect to things like HVAC systems, or monitor the power systems, or can do things like turn off the entire electrical system in the building. And I've seen that kind of dynamic with even just developers or just users who, place, this interest in just getting things done. And that creates this tension with security that you can't really solve easily unless you build for it. And security teams today, I think, push too many problems onto the users instead of providing them easy platforms and solutions to not have to get into that situation to begin with.
Okay. Gaurav, looked like you want to say something.
Yep. So, I give the example from internal developer platform, IDP. So you have we talk about the shift left, right? So DevSecOps started through that shift left. So the examples I can give here is that in terms of both CI pipeline and the CD pipeline. So in the CI pipeline, developer has pushed a commit. He wants to go to merge to his PR. He wants to track the whole DORA metrics to get to production as soon as possible. But then in our CI pipeline, we bake into it some security governance, stuff like, has this software is in compliance with your licenses? So we run, let's say, for example, FOSSA scan, or you want to run your static code analysis tool. And those tools sometimes do break intermittently. And at the time when it breaks, you basically block that commit to go to any mainline branch. And then that's where you see a friction. So there's, of course, a friction in terms of like getting to a speed, plus also the counterpoint is that how you're providing the stability. That's a part of CI pipeline. In the CD pipeline, let's say you built the image, and it passed all your vulnerability database checks, but that's sitting in your registry for, let's say, 6 months, and now it's time for you to pull that image. Now you will, as a platform team, will of course run some webhooks mutation to see if that still passes that check or not. And if it doesn't, we then reject those admission controller policies in Kubernetes to reject that image. So now you see that where things are, where if a developer wants to go to the ship the things as soon as possible, but now they have to go and fix those images in terms of vulnerabilities.
So when that happens, what are the developers like shouting at the security team? Are they saying we don't need these checks, or?
Yeah, there is always like that. They will ask is this like critical enough? So for example, then we have to go and take a look at the vulnerability exchange report. Is this bug, or is the CVE found? Is it still going to impact the end user? So then there is a whole dialogue between the security team and the developer team to realize that this CVE is still at risk. Yes, it is a CVE, but is it still a risk to my application or not? So yes, then there's a whole mutual dialogue between those two teams.
So do those teams have a good relationship?
It is more of a synergy in some ways. I mean, sometimes the timing is not proper, meaning they're committed sprints, they're committed to the end user customers, and then sometimes it impacts the delivery. So how do you make sure that both the developer freedom as well as security is kind of go hand in hand? So it's kind of like give and take in some respects. Yes.
Okay. I mean, that kind of brings me on to the next thing I wanted to ask about. So is it possible to balance like developer freedom and security? It sounds like in your case you've got to some level of symbiosis. Does anybody else have?
So I've like worked within those teams, but kind of my best experience of that was 5 or 6 years ago now. And to me, the challenge is chronic underinvestment with security teams. So it was teams who weren't skilled in the things that they needed to be skilled at, and no investment from organizations to get them skilled in those areas. So, for example, security teams that had come up through a similar route to which I had, which was through like big qualifications that had massive stacks of books with lots of rules in them, and how do you check those rules? Most of the examples were manual, or were telling you that you needed to put your blinds down in your office so no one could look over your shoulder and see your code, right? Like that's not realistic or practical. And then you'd have like 2 guys, the only 2 guys that knew how to, it was always guys, who knew how to write code with security lenses on it. And they were trying to look after 12 development teams, I think, in this project that was like due in 2 years, and they had to sign off every single story because that's what the big security monolith team in their silo said had to be done. And it was just totally unwieldy. And I want to say it's changed, but now the customers that we work with have similar challenges as well of like, oh, security over there in their black box are waiting for us to come up with a solution to solve their problems. And that's instead what I think you can balance it, but you have to invest in those security teams to get them skilled up in automation, to get them skilled up in code so that they understand what it means and can put those checks in as code. Otherwise, like you're just going to have to spend loads of money to hire lots of people to manually check things and not block them.
I am getting the impression that security is being seen as a list of tick boxes in a lot of organizations. Is that fair?
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, I think, in general, we like to think of the craft of engineering as a form of artistry. And we don't want to be put into these boxes, bean counters. But I can tell you that if you don't follow a few of the checklists, you will have problems. Like there is a checklist component, right? So organizations like OWASP have been great, and NIST have been great, and IST. Like they give clear guidelines that are sensible, simple, and you have a variety of options. So I think there is a place for check boxes in security in a way that may not be so true in other areas of software engineering and building in general, but like building technology in general, but definitely don't want to limit to check boxes.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of checkbox security, but I think we have set up our security tooling industry to push all of the, like almost effectively having the security team bully the developers into doing the right thing. And I think that's just a bad approach. When one of the best pieces of advice we got with Edera was, you want to make a tool that makes the developer teams and the security teams like each other again. And honest to God, I think that is just the most powerful thing to think about. So what we always talk about when we build security tools these days is about pushing solutions to people. And instead of blaming the developer, like really helping them accomplish and fix what's wrong, rather than just giving them a big list of problems for them to fix. And I think that's the way that the industry has to go to make this situation better.
I will give an example how the platform team made friends with the security team. It's my real world experience.
They bought a bottle of whiskey?
Yeah. So there was a use case where the developers will get these notifications from cybersec team. Are you running any open source software that is in not compliance with our licensing? Right. So, like for example, you've heard about Redis and others, they have changed their licenses. And now each team would have to go and look at the dependencies in their 200 services. And just make an example here. And then this, how then we can provide an automation, right? So where the platform team came and said that, okay, we'll build a tool for you. We just will make sure that all your artifacts have the software bill of materials. It has the right into metadata attestations, and we'll dump all that data into your warehouse. So now you can write a SQL query on top of that and say, hey, is this version of microservice, what version of my dependencies are running? And are they breaking a license or not? So with this example, you can provide this tooling to the developers who you can then, they can focus on their business logic, all right? And then you can abstract that level of administration work to the platform team. And then that's where you provide the value, and then they understand why your tooling is important for them. Even if sometimes it impedes their velocity, they understand the value of it later on. So
it's a good answer. So I'm going to ask each of you, which is more important, security or developer freedom? And don't give a whole answer, just tell me in one word. Alex?
Security.
Kat?
What's the industry?
That's not a one-word answer.
Context.
Okay.
Developer freedom.
security.
Okay.
Of course it's security. I'm not trying to get
I'm
fired,
not sure
boss.
it is, because, right, I'm going to, possibly a hot take. I think it's developer freedom, because you only have security when you have something to secure. Like, if we just turn everything off, it's going to be secure.
That's right.
But yeah, we have to have something to work to turn off. But I think Kat possibly has the strongest point, because that might be a bad idea if I build a train that crashes or something.
Right.
So I worked at a crypto bank at one point, and they had a card, physical card that you could use to take fiat, so dollars out, but using your Bitcoin. Pretty cool, but someone had their card stolen, and they realized that they didn't have good enough PIN controls and checks in it, and they were able to take out $20,000 from this person's account in their Bitcoin, just in a cash machine using tap or something, because this was in South Africa. And it was because they hadn't secured it well enough. So there is definitely a need for the security. But they were able to refund that person $20,000 because they had sold so many of the accounts on this cool feature that the cost was worth it, right? So they were able to secure it after the fact. So that's what I mean in context, right? But what they couldn't do is quantify the brand damage that came off the back of it. But very cool card, very cool tool. So that's what the context to me is about. Sometimes, what's the risk? If the risk is low and the cost is fairly low, maybe you go unsecure. But also sometimes you see all these big banks that have lost millions and millions because they haven't secured something and someone's found a backdoor.
Yeah, that's an excellent answer. I would like to change tack slightly. What about open source? Because I feel open source projects often get the raw end of this, especially with CVEs. They get all this CVEs reported against their projects, and it adds up to extra work for these volunteers, effectively. So I was wondering if the team had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, this goes back to that solar question I posed to the audience. In 2019, a researcher exploited a flaw, really came down to control flow, a flaw in a poor API design, in the Solar authorization and authentication scheme, where you needed to be able to, after you enable authentication, you need to specify another Boolean flag in the same JSON. I think the field was use authentication. So you enable it, then you have to have use it. So you need to have two Booleans that said true. It didn't make any sense. It's I enabled it. It should be enabled. And the result was someone had taken over thousands of solar nodes in various clusters around the world and converted them to Bitcoin miners. All this leads back to Bitcoin. And I worked at a company where we had a lot of customers that use solar, and so this was a big issue for us. And so I worked with our security team. I worked kind of late, a few days in a row to resolve this. And sure, there were people outside, like at Amazon and Elastic and LucidWorks, where I work, that helped me with this, with solving this problem. And yeah, it took more time than usual. But were we really volunteers? Like, we all get paid to work on the software, and we all benefit far more than we contribute. So, like, I think it's part of the job. Like, if you take on the responsibility of open source stewardship, right? Like, it's great to land a PR, but there's other responsibilities that come with, you know, when you become a committer or maintainer of that project, and the onus is on us. And that's why companies should pay their open source developers more money too. Just
That's a good take. Alex, look like you have something to say, and then
Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about this because we recently found a vulnerability in an open source project here at Edera. The vulnerability is called Tarmageddon. You can look it up. I won't iterate it here, but one of the interesting contributions to the CVE was effectively that a lot of the people in the chain, one of the important details here is that the library was a fork of a fork of a fork of a fork, which is a nightmare. But we need a way as an industry to signal what support we want to provide a project. I am someone who I like to make GitHub repos and then never touch them again. Yeah. And if I get a CVE against that, I am going to cry because it is not my responsibility to maintain something that I did not indicate that I want to maintain. It's like asking someone to edit your blog post that's wrong that was written 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, we need a better way of indicating, and I would love for someone like GitLab or GitHub to pioneer some sort of indicator for how much you want to support something. There are a lot of companies that pay people to support open source projects, or whether that's through actually salary or whether that's through funding, like a donation. In those cases, we can indicate those things. And I think the problem is when we started going through this particular vulnerability, it was hard for us to go reach out to people who, you know, haven't touched their repository in 5 years and expect them to fix it.
Yeah, I love that idea. Unfortunately, we're coming towards the end, so I'm kind of hoping if you can all just briefly give me like a tip for everybody on how they should, you know, manage this balance and freedom and developer security, or a tool or something like that. Do you want to go first, Gaurav?
Sure. Yeah, I think the key point here is the balance between both the developer platform or the application engineers as well as the security engineers. And the way to do is to like provide an abstractions and interface where you can take away the infrastructure responsibilities from applications team. So you have a centralized platform team that manages end-to-end operations. And that moves the business needle for the applications team because they don't have to understand every nitty-gritty details of infrastructure. And the security comes in the place where if you bake the security in the platform itself, things that I talked about, like making sure that your CI/CD pipelines are in a way that is not breaking any license checks or stuff like that, as a common example, would be beneficial for the whole company.
Yeah. Marcus?
I would say use smaller images.
Where would you get those? No.
Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, like, set yourself up for fast recovery. That's really what that was about. It's like something bad will happen. There will be some issue that will need to be remediated. And if you've architected your system to recover quickly and not have to depend on a week or 2 weeks for downstream dependencies or upstream dependencies, you're going to be a lot happier and a lot more successful with giving your team more freedom.
Kat?
So, I mean, I have to do the user platform orchestrator to bake it in, similar to like what Gaurav was saying of like have that part of your platform, and there are tools that let you do that automatically. But the ex-consultant in me also says that if you haven't looked at threat modeling, that is great. So get your security team and your developer teams in the same room and actually talk about what are the risks in your business and then codify those risks rather than like, let's just do everything that everything says we have to because we want to be super secure. Like, find that balance, but do it collaboratively.
I think the most important thing to take away is security teams should have more willingness to help their developers, and that developers should be more receptive to what security wants. I think it's a two-way street. And I think I've seen organizations where it's an antagonistic relationship, or like, for example, the security team is doing nothing but auditing your stuff. That is a wrong way to go. I'm a kind of servant culture kind of person, so I like to think that both sides should try to serve each other and each other's interests.
Okay, excellent. That was a great point to end. I'm sorry that seemed really quick, but oh, you're saying 5 minutes. I thought. Oh, I was told it was 25 minutes. It has been 10 past.
All right. Who's in for another tip? All right.
Yeah, if somebody else asks it. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to take questions from the audience, but I have 10 more minutes, so on you go. Someone's got one there. Oh,
Question? Anyone have a question?
I was Russian there as well.
Yeah. So can I ask a question to the panelists? From panelists to panelists? You know, so I previously held this view that I would only adopt open source software, like software where I could see the code. I wasn't, religious about the license necessarily, depending on what the license was. But do you think that actually poses an advantage for security?
So this goes, well, I suppose I am the host. You've taken over the host, so I can answer. But this goes back to an interesting character that came up with that all bugs are shallow. I don't think that's necessarily the case, because people don't look deep into the code. And we're getting, like, especially with AI code, there's going to be so much more code, and people aren't really going to look at it. So I think it probably is safer with open source, but it's marginal, be my take.
It's like safer in theory. Again, you're just pushing more work onto security teams, because like, are your developers going to read it? Nope. They're just going to push whatever's going to be useful for them. So who takes the burden of reviewing all these probably overly large, a little bit like hard to maintain, messy code bases that are built organically over time? Because that's kind of what open source is, right? You find a problem, you solve the problem. It's not, okay, I efficiently need to write it in the perfect way and all of those things. So yeah, I've actually worked with most of the organizations by COTS because they can get it accredited and they know that there is a big machine that's going to maintain this thing over time behind it. Depends on, again, risk profile.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because open source kind of gives you the feeling like, oh, someone else is going to look at it. But that's not always true. I can confidently tell you, we just recently, this morning, released a bootloader, UEFI bootloader. And during that, I had to read a lot of systemd source code. I can confidently tell you that just because it's open source doesn't mean it's good. And that is something to keep in mind. And I think that it's a safety net, a mental safety net, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that it's going to, a lot of bugs get found just because someone goes and like pokes at a file by accident. And that can happen anywhere. But especially in the lower in the stack you are, the more bugs there are that have been sitting there for a long time. Also had to read the GNU grub source code. If you know anything about GNU grub, I am so sorry.
Yeah, I would say though, at least with open source, you can go and fix it and open a PR and so on, which isn't going to be the same case with most enterprise software.
All right, I've got another question for you all. In my, second stint as panelist, host. Why are people so mean online when, in general, no, why are people so mean online when there's an incident? Like when maybe it's a reliability related incident, configuration mistakes, but we can also just keep it on the security topic. Like, that happened to you 5 years ago. Why are you so mean? I'm just curious. What are your takes on that and perspectives?
I will answer that because I've dealt with a lot of online hate before. So I will
I'm
say,
sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. We live and learn. What I will say is, people online suck. That's just the truth, and you know, it's amplified because a GitHub issue. I can't even begin to tell you how many GitHub issues I just like want to hit report comment on. But there is a barrier or lack of barrier for people to be able to just be mean and nasty when something happens. And this is kind of where that indicator thing I mentioned earlier is important, because I think that there have been multiple open source projects, notable open source projects with issues where, like, for example, something just randomly breaks one day. And there have been flame wars and disgusting things been sent to maintainers. And that stuff needs to stop. I don't have any good solutions past that.
Yeah, I think it's not just mean, I think it's entitled behavior. Like, people go into open source projects demanding they fix this or demanding they update this. And, you know, it's volunteers. You can't really demand things of them.
Yeah, and I'll say one more thing about that. My co-founder, Ariadne Connell, is a long-time open source developer, maintains package conf, and basically every system that you're using right now has some of her code in it. And one of the things that I have seen is she does this in her free time. She does not necessarily get paid to maintain package conf here at Edera. And she has to deal with a lot of people who file issues and are mean to her, write blog posts about how they don't like a technical decision. That is not a way to communicate. And people, and honestly, it's usually corporate people who are very entitled and put their issues on GitHub and make everything annoying for everyone. So I know there's other corporate people here. Please do better.